Hey everyone, welcome to the Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva. Today, joining me on the Private Podcast is Shermin Voshmgir. She is the author of the book Token Economy, the founder of Token Kitchen, and a data-driven farming and publishing house researching and designing token recipes for sustainable agricultural practices and ecosystem services on a farm in Portugal. She's also the founder of BlockchainHub Berlin and was a curator for the DAO. She is currently living in Portugal, where she is working on the intersection of technology, agriculture, art, and social science. And now, over to the conversation with Shermin Voshmgir. All right, and like I said off the top, we have Shermin Voshmgir here, spending some time with us on the Private Podcast. Shermin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Derek. Really a pleasure to be here.
Great. Just before we started recording, we were reminiscing about Portugal and how nice it is.
Yeah, I
And
didn't know you were originally from Portugal, so
that's okay.
here we
Well,
have.
well, actually, I was born in Canada, but my family, like 99% of my family, still lives there. But we'll get to Portugal in a sec. Um,
Okay.
First, you've actually been around the crypto space for a while. Can you tell us, even a curator for the DAO, and the infamous DAO as you describe it on your website? Can you tell us about your journey into blockchain, cryptocurrencies?
Blockchain.
How you got started?
Yeah, it was at the party very, very late at night. Somebody said blockchain. I'm like, what's blockchain? Then it was a friend of a friend who's now a dear friend, and he started explaining. I'm like, okay. But you know how it is at a party. Next day you wake up, you're like, wait a minute, there was something interesting, but what did he say? How do you remember the word blockchain, right? When you hear it for the first
Yeah.
time, and that was 2014, right?
Mm.
So I'm like, or yeah, 14, 15. So I'm like, oh, technology, Bitcoin. So it was Sunday morning in August, I think, and it's hot. Everybody's like, I wake up early, so usually people like try to go to the lakes in Berlin, and I'm like, technology, Bitcoin. And then I find like a few videos, a lot of GitHub repositories, and like some tech chats back then. There was literally very little information about like what it is for non-techies, but like I understand part of it, and what I understand resonates. Like my whole body is doing this thing that you know, and I call it the white rabbit. So every once in a while, you see or feel the white rabbit and you have to follow it. So I'm like, okay, what I instantly understood was that it is a technology that could provide a kind of I what I this is how I explain it now, but it wouldn't be the words that I would have had before. But I understood that it was a technology that could provide a governance layer for many economic and social and political challenges that we have to change these things. But I didn't know exactly
Hmm.
how. So as I was like, and I was like, the whole day I was in like almost in bed, and I was just going through the information and to soak everything up. And I'm like, okay, I have to do this now. And as I was learning, I started because I saw that, and there was no website, there was no book on this topic, there was no website on this topic. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, as I was trying to figure out what this is, not only from a technological level, but also what the economic and political implications are, I was sharing this information first on a Tumblr blog back then when it was still a thing, and eventually this website. I started organizing the first meetups, and it became a mini think tank around all things blockchain. So I started the Blockchain Hub in Berlin first as a website, then as a thing. I looked for a co-working space, and funny enough, by coincidence, ended up like there was this co-working space in the same building where Ethereum had their office, but the co-working
Okay.
space to like downstairs, they were full. that same evening, I go to Ethereum meetup. And just after the meetup, I talked to, I think it was Fabian Vogelsteller. So I'm yeah, I was looking today. I was in the same location because I'm looking for a co-working space. Don't want to work from home anymore. He's like, yeah, but I think we have some shared desks here. Talk to this and this guy. And this is how like everything happened kind of very fast. And as I was soaking up the information, sharing the information, going to my first meetups, I stopped doing what I was doing before and more started doing the Blockchain Hub. And so my focus from the beginning was to make the technology accessible to a non-tech audience to understand how we can use it, because I think people always mistake technology, the tool, with the application. And they always talk
Yeah.
about blockchain technology. No, it's blockchain networks. Okay. It's publicly maintained it's a publicly maintained infrastructure. The Web3 is a
Hmm.
publicly maintained infrastructure that we can now use to do cool, more sophisticated, more international interactions over the web, right? And
Right.
and as I was figuring this out and trying to put the focus more on the socioeconomic aspects, yeah. So I did the Blockchain Hub for a few years, and then the chance opportunity came along to go back to my alma mater in Vienna, where I studied, and start this research institute for crypto economics. So we tried to do some interdisciplinary research, and originally so I instantly said we can't call it blockchain because it's so much more. It's about like the combination of crypto and economics. So it was like a research institute on the intersection of research and development and interdisciplinary. I did that for a while. And as I was writing my book, Token Economy, first I wanted to call it network economy, but as the book shaped and took form, I realized that it's really the tokens that are the killer application of this new Web3. And yeah, then that happened, and I'm currently um, working on the third edition of the book Token Economy because the space is moving fast. And yeah, to long story short, I'm now in Portugal with my kind of company Token Kitchen, and I stopped doing the consulting side and currently really focusing now on building kind of a concept farm in Portugal, where we want to look at data-driven farming, using kind of giving a blockchain identity to all the olive trees, starting with the olive trees, creating proof of olive tree, collecting data about what happens in the land to create kind of digital verifiable, publicly verifiable proofs about, for example, proof of CO2 capture, water retention,
Hmm.
things that would have a market on that kind of certificates, tokenized certificates that farmers could sell on CO2 markets to have additional revenue streams for doing the right thing, I would say, to kind of to make additional money if they can prove that they have sustainable agricultural practices. But to
Okay.
understand what, so we're starting this now. This is very, very new, but everything else has been going on for a while.
Okay. Lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
First, Tumblr is back, so I hear. Gen
Okay.
Z loves the anonymity. And of course, Automatic, the makers of WordPress or the maintainers of WordPress, bought it a year or two ago off of
Okay.
Verizon, I think, or Yahoo. Yahoo, which was owned by Verizon because that whole rigmarole. But anyway, I hear it's back in vogue with, I guess, my kids' generation. But thankfully,
Okay.
my kids are a little bit too young to be on Public or on Tumblr at this point. So there's that, and yeah, like you got in really early. So like, how did you end up becoming a curator for the DAO? Was that just because you were
Okay.
uh,
No, it
like
was
meeting
because I was.
meeting people like Fabian early on in Berlin and stuff like that, or
Yeah, I mean, I was in the Ethereum office, so I knew the Ethereum people, and then it was like May 2016, was it? Yeah, that was the year of the DAO. So I was wondering, I was trying to figure out what this is because the DAO was claiming to be this decentralized organization, decentralized investment fund, and
Mhm.
I didn't understand like I looked at their value proposition and it didn't make sense for me that they wanted to automate everything by code. So I kept running around and asking people, that were involved, or the curators. It's like, like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense to me, you know. I mean, at the general concept, yes, but the actual implementation, and then I think it was at a conference in Paris, and Gavin Wood was there too as a speaker, and I was there too as a speaker, and I approached him, and I think I was also wondering, yeah, that was it. I was wondering, there were 12 curators, all men, no women. So I went there and I said, yeah, Gavin, and they're talking about revolutionizing the world, and it's basically 12 white male guys trying to be the curators, and I mean, the role of the curators was highly mistaken, but they were so prominent in the DAO. And as a woman of, like, an ethnic background, I was wondering, is like, how are they going to revolutionize the world being like Caucasian male from a certain geographical area, like basically all
Right.
Europeans, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I approached Gavin and I'm like, why is it only men? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. I was asked by Christoph, but I want to step back from being a curator. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, I was like, I didn't even know
Replacing
what
Gavin
to
Wood?
say.
I'm guessing this is Gavin Wood, right?
Yeah, Gavin Wood as a curator. So I'm like, I didn't even, like, my question was, why isn't there a woman? I wasn't expecting him to say, like, I'm stepping back. Do you want to do it instead of me? I didn't even answer. I'm like, I don't know. No, I think I said, I don't know because I don't know because I don't understand the DAO. I don't know. I don't understand what you're doing. So I
Right.
forgot this, right? 2 weeks later, Alex van der Zandt on Twitter, I'd never spoken to him, pings me and he's like, oh, I heard you want to be a curator of the DAO. And I'm like, what? I'm like, no. But I didn't know how to say no, because here I am. Now I'm in a really weird situation because I'm very critical of what they're trying to do. Or no, how they're
Hmm.
trying to do it. Not what they're trying to do,
Yeah,
but
right.
how they're
Right,
trying
right.
to do it. I think maybe I'm stupid and I don't get it. Yeah, right? Because I saw the whole shit thing. Of course you can't have no governance. You can't put everything in the rules.
Right.
That's like, it's like, how can you think that this is something you can do, right? So having some, so I kept thinking maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I don't get it. Maybe they have some magic wand that I don't understand. And but then they keep approaching me because they needed a replacement for Gavin, who just stepped back. And obviously, they also apparently wanted more diversity. And so they keep asking me, and I don't know how to say no, because here I am, and I'm like, I don't want to do it because I don't understand it. And at that point, everybody was panicking already because there was like this thing about the potential attack vectors, etc. So I'm like, how can I be a curator of something that I don't understand? So I wanted to say
Yeah.
no, but I didn't know how to say no, because here I am asking why there are no women, and I get the chance to be part of it. And how can I
Right.
say no? But
Yeah.
I couldn't say yes either. So I didn't say no and I didn't say yes. So 2 weeks pass, and then I meet Christoph Jensch in the Ethereum office. And he's like, oh, you're Shermin, right? You want to be a curator. You want to replace that, Gavin. I'm like, no, actually not. I just asked why there are no women. And then he's like, yeah, you're right. I just sent an email to a bunch of friends and they all happen to be, these people. I think there was one
White
woman, and
guys, yeah.
she said, yeah, yeah. And but you're right. Do you want to do it? And then, I never said yes, but I kept getting, the information, and I could not say no. And this is how I ended up in this situation. And I became a curator, and 4 days later, this thing was hacked. And it took me down the rabbit hole. But I tell you something, I'm happy in hindsight that I was like overwhelmed, because all of a sudden I'm in the chat with all these people who started building. I was relatively new to this blockchain world, and I was trying to still figure out what these things are. Now, I'm not a developer. I don't understand everything in detail. And I was learning a lot through the crisis management, being in these Skype channels, hearing what they're saying. And
Right.
I
Wow.
completely realized, like, I didn't have an opinion because, like, with some things, I kept thinking maybe I didn't understand. But yeah, in the end, this is how I learned, or this is what helped me also then write my book about how
Hmm.
blockchain networks really are a governance technology, because all of a sudden you're in a Skype chat with 12 curators, all of which it's like the new boardroom of the new institutions that are distributed.
Right.
Everyone is in a different time zone. And the meetings are asynchronous, right? Because you don't have a meeting where everybody talks at the same time. Everybody talks and then other people answer when they're online. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it was like, as history was writing itself, and this I this first self-proclaimed DAO. I still think that Bitcoin is the first DAO, but like this first big application DAO was forming. I could see like how people are minting new words to describe the things that were happening. So it was all a lot of food for thought for my book in the end.
Okay. Fair enough. So you've had quite the journey. You've got Token Kitchen going now. You've
Yeah.
moved to Portugal. Like, what's the environment like in Portugal now, and how do you enjoy living there? Like, I know you've got the farm and everything. So obviously, this is all,
Yeah,
this
I
all
mean,
works together. But
yes. So I love Portugal. The reason I came to Portugal is because I wanted to move to the countryside, and the countryside in Germany was, or in Austria, was not an option for me. Also because it was just probably too expensive to buy a farm of the size to do what I want to do. And
okay,
Portugal is sunnier and more affordable. And also, there was a huge gut feeling because I'd been here at two conferences and I felt this is the next place to go. And then the pandemic had happened. But what I can see is that many people are moving to Portugal, like almost, I would say, a third of the people I know from the blockchain space in Berlin. And some of the people from Vienna have already moved to Portugal. So
hmm,
Portugal, like Lisbon, seems to be the new Berlin, where everybody is moving to. However, I'm not in Lisbon myself. I live a very different life now in the countryside.
well, yeah, you're farming
But
olives.
yeah, we have old olive trees on the farm, what I want to do now is to apply my know-how of tokenization together with my partner. He builds crypto hardware. His company builds kind of the blockchain wallets for industrial machines, but we can use these
Oh,
blockchain
cool.
wallets also to tag trees. And what we would like to investigate is how can we start to collect, because sensor technology for farming already exists, but how do you make them Web3 ready? You need to start giving blockchain identities, a blockchain address, unique blockchain identities to the objects you want to kind of measure, right? So we want to
Right.
create a kind of proof of olive tree, and have olive tree NFTs. And now there are an experiment, many things that we can do with this. Um, uh, there are things you could do around co-ownership of olive trees and co-revenue sharing of the crops, etc.
Hmm.
This is not so much, this is something we can look at as well. But I think my personal kind of vision of what we want to do in this concept farm is to figure out new types of revenue streams. How can we create data-driven proofs for kind of the amount of CO2 capture in the soil based on the type of agricultural activities that you're doing? And CO2 has a market value. There are CO2, if you apply for a CO2 certificate standard, you could start proving that certain agricultural practices based on certain scientific data, um, yeah, uh, let yeah have a certain value of CO2 capture, for example, and then let's say, this is a random number, there's scientific data that trees or other plant life, they do carbon sequestration in the soil, right? And
Right.
then depending on the age of the tree or the nature of the tree and other plant life, you would have more carbon sequestration, capturing of carbon in from the air in the soil than with other plant life or trees or a different age of trees. For example,
Sure.
and we can create completely new incentive systems. For example, nowadays, many of the sustainability programs incentivize people to plant new trees. But then people start cutting old trees and planting new ones. That doesn't make sense at all, right? Because
Right. The old
old
ones
trees
capture a lot more
need less,
carbon.
they capture more carbon and they need less water. The irrigation
Right.
it's crazy to we need to collect all this data about what sustainability means. Then we can create a bundle of CO2 certificates, and nowadays many voluntary standards also include biodiversity and other sustainability measures, and we can tokenize in the future. We could tokenize these CO2 certificates and create kind of proof of sustainability, proof of CO2 capture based on proof of olive tree, for example. And the question is, what do you need to tag with probably, and we are trying to figure out how we need to tag the trees so they can optimally communicate with the sensors in the soil and the drones flying over the tree and kind of controlling on a regular basis, capturing whether the tree is actually there and whether it's the same tree and not a new tree, right? So how can we
Right.
create digital verifiable proofs so the public can trust the system, right? Disintermediate this certification process. Yeah, so we're trying to build this. But as I said, we're in the very, very early stages currently.
Okay. So I was just looking up. I wanted to get some numbers. Um, it looks like so producing a liter of olive oil actually captures more than 10 kilograms of CO2 from the atmosphere, which, I mean, usually production, goes the other way around. So that's, I think, impressive. And according to internationaloliveoil.org, so it looks like this. Oh, this is the International Olive Council. So obviously that's going to be biased,
Mm-hmm.
but um, it looks like worldwide olive oil production could capture the equivalent of what the city of Hong Kong produces in CO2 per year. So, like,
Yeah, so I'm
were
not,
these sorts of
yes, for example, right? This is, we're still looking into the data, right? Because the
Mhm.
question is, what data can you trust? But what I can tell you is that on the property that I bought and like I invested like my money to do this kind of, we want to create a foundation around this and to create kind of a research lab in the countryside, and this is exactly what we want to figure out. How reliable is this data that you just quoted? Because
Right.
there is not one science, the different scientists say different things. So which data
Hmm.
can we trust? And then an olive tree is not an olive tree, right? The carbon capture depends, as I said, on the age, on the type, on the
Yeah.
soil, on the geographical location. And so what we want to do is evaluate how much our olive trees would capture. And for example, the olive trees that are on that farm, they're like over 100 years old. There was a
Oh
farmer
wow.
who advised us to cut them all and plant new ones. And I was like, what? Like, this is not only a genocide to 2,000 trees, but it's also, it's crazy because the amount of, I don't even have the amount of water to be able,
Yeah.
and olive trees don't produce useful crop to sell for the first 10 years, from what I understand. So, but this is the thinking in mainstream agriculture. It's like you want to maximize the output, but they don't like, it doesn't make any sense because the olive trees that I have there now, they haven't been watered in 20 years. This year we didn't have rain at all. Still, they bear fruit because their root systems is so
Oh,
deep.
wow.
So what we want to do there is bring olive tree experts, sustainability experts who are
Hmm.
focused on measuring or on the science of these sustainability indicators. We want to understand what indicators are there beyond carbon capture, because carbon capture is only one. It's about soil quality, water retention, carbon capture, the output quality. This all goes hand in hand. And
Yeah.
but carbon is what has a market now. The loss of the biodiversity leads to carbon capture. So how can we increase biodiversity by avoiding monoculture, etc., and all these things? So we want to bring scientists, environmental scientists, farming experts together with the expertise Tom and I, my partner and I have, the kind of the blockchain know-how, the technical and the economic blockchain know-how that we have, and try to we're setting up this proof of concept on that farm this winter.
Okay, cool. I wish you the best of luck
Yeah.
with that.
And to give credit, maybe just to close this, I have to give credit to Walid from Rebalance Earth, because they're trying to do something very similar. And this is what inspired me as I was analyzing his use case for my book. They're creating kind of what I call a proof of elephant or proof of biodiversity. It has been proven that forest elephants in Africa, when they die out and they're a protected species, the forests have 7% less CO2 capture, because with them, a bunch of other biodiversity dies, and plant life and water retention, etc. Boreholes are not there anymore. Other plant life and biodiversity dies, and there is less carbon capture. So by
Right.
protecting, creating proof of elephant, what they're doing, Rebalance Earth, they want to create a system whereby kind of the lifetime value of an elephant is known, the carbon capture of the average lifetime value of the average life of 60 years. And per day of existence of the elephant, they want to issue CO2 certificates, tokenized CO2 certificates that they want to sell on the markets, and then the revenues will be used to have more forest rangers, because the national parks are underfunded, to protect the elephants, etc., etc. So for those of you who might be interested in that use case and what we're doing, I will be describing this Rebalance Earth use case in detail in the next edition of my book.
Okay. Yeah, I just found the website rebalance.earth for anybody who's looking for that. Um,
Yeah, they do amazing stuff. There is also an older blog post from last year that I wrote up on what they're doing, but they
okay.
have evolved, and there will be more details. Yeah, so there is a bunch of really interesting stuff that we can do with tokenization and the Web3 beyond crypto, like what like beyond DeFi or traditional cryptocurrencies around DeFi and stable tokens and peer-to-peer lending. And
Yeah.
actually, there is this whole refi movement that focuses on these regenerative financial technologies that could help unfuck the world by doing the right thing, right? And the question is, how do we what is the token incentive mechanism that you create, right? And this
Right.
is what we need to figure out. This is where at the very early stages of understanding what types of tokens are out there, what can we do with tokens, what properties can tokens have, and how to design the token system based on the purpose of the system I want to create. How do I need to incentivize the people or the activities in the network and the stakeholders in the network with what types of tokens, so we can all move into the same direction, right? So whether the
Okay.
purpose, so for Bitcoin, the purpose was peer-to-peer a payment network, so it was proof of work.
Hmm.
But for a peer-to-peer social network, or for CO2 capture, or for protecting plant or animal life, you need different types of mechanism design for those tokens.
Yeah, for sure. So you've mentioned the book a few times. It's called Token Economy. Can you tell us about your initial you published it in what you call an open source way. Can you ended up having a bunch of volunteers translate it through GitHub repos. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book itself, the second edition, and I
Okay.
know you're working on the third edition now.
Yeah, so I think the book really was when I started writing the book, I built I rehashed a lot of the information that was already on the Blockchain Hub website that we had produced over the years, and I had made predominantly, and that was like the basis. And because of the content that we produced on Blockchain Hub was always under a Creative Commons license, and in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
information has to be free. So even though when I and obviously, so the book token economy was much more than what we did at the Blockchain Hub. It took it to the next level because first
Right.
it was kind of an evolution out of the blog post. We did kind of a blockchain handbook that kind of had so many downloads back then for people starting in the Web3 and they didn't know what it was. And then based on, and that was also under a Creative Commons license. So when I published the book, the first edition, when I published the first edition of the book, I realized that we need to make the open source quality of the book, and but I yeah, and in the second edition, what I did, but I didn't put it online for free. Then the second edition, at some point, I realized that I should put it online for free. It doesn't help if it's only Creative Commons, right? So I put it on GitHub,
Right.
and I was like, I was also hoping that, I didn't want to write a third edition anymore. I'm like, okay, that's it, two editions. I want to move on to the next thing, and so I put it on GitHub for free. Because I have Iranian heritage, so I know that in Iran, for example, you can't access um, Amazon because of the sanctions. And
Right.
even if you could,
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
people don't have the money. So and this is why I put it online for free, so people could access it for free. Those who couldn't, didn't have the money to pay it, or would have other restrictions. And when I published it, I said anyone can take it and modify the text and add maybe code samples, do whatever you want with it, basically. And what
Right.
happened within 10 days, 30 people contacted me from, like, mostly over LinkedIn, I have to say, less Twitter, and from different countries. And they're like, hey, I want to translate your book into Spanish. Does the Spanish work at Polish? Iranian version. I'm like, what? And then I was finding, like, I was in a position where I had to coordinate all these people who didn't know each other but wanted to translate it into the same language. I was really overwhelmed because nobody ever developed kind of the content, the English content of the book, but it was translated into 9 languages, most of which
Nice.
were completely, and some of which we then also, in addition to the free version, published over Amazon, etc., um, as a kind of the ebook version and the print version for those who want to buy it, because it's very different products, right? An online version is
Yeah.
not the same thing like a print book. And the funny thing is that in spite of the fact that the free version exists, still 50% of my sales are ebooks,
Hmm.
because an ebook seems
It's
to be a very
it's a
different.
convenient format.
It's a very convenient format. You have it in your, for those who like to read ebooks, you can,
Yeah.
you can edit it, you can put your own comments. You can't do that on GitHub. So even though many people, like, I think Andreas, he also, like, I was also inspired by Andreas Antonopoulos, who always put his content on GitHub. But what he did was put a PDF online. What I did was
Right.
create a GitHub wiki so it can be properly consumed as a web page.
Okay.
And so it's better to read online, but you can't edit it. So apparently, many people still prefer to even buy the ebook version for their Kindle or whatever other format, because it makes sense reading. So I was really surprised. The by the willingness of people to translate this book, and B, the fact that even though it exists as a free version, people will still buy it.
Cool. And so I know you were looking for feedback for a third version on your blog. Like, it sounds like you're going to incorporate some new instead of writing a whole new book. You decided to actually incorporate some new stuff into a third edition.
Yeah,
Is that actually underway now, or
yeah.
are you still in the planning?
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So I'm hoping to finish. So before Christmas, this third edition can be out. It will be a third updated and enhanced edition. So the content, because a lot has changed in the last 2.5 years in crypto, will be updated. What needs update, and then I will, especially the use case part, the part 3 and part 4 will be reworked. I will add new use cases, as for example, rebalance Earth. I didn't have that in my prior editions. And I will
Hmm.
analyze the use cases in the last part. I created this framework for analyzing purpose-driven tokens, the stakeholders in the
Nice.
network, and how the token system works to help people understand the complexities of tokens that steer kind of a network or a DAO, and because you do need to look at the stakeholders, what type of stakeholders you have, what are their purpose, what is their role, or what are the rewards, what do they get out of doing what, being part of the system, and what are the actual power structures, right? Because what people, I don't think that the Web3 blockchain or crypto is per definition more democratic. It's not. It has the potential to be more inclusive. It's definitely a
Hmm.
collective internet, but whether or not there are more or less power structures, whether or not it's more or less democratic, depends on how much the individual participant in a network can influence that network. That's what,
Right.
this is how we also write. But if you look at many of the blockchain networks and decentralized applications building on top of them, we always have quite intense power structures. There's one of the reasons Steemit, for example, I don't know, for those who know Steemit as one of the first, or the first social media network in the Web3,
Yeah.
the value proposition was amazing. Their token design was so bad because it created unhealthy power structures that nobody wanted to be part of the system anymore, because the reward mechanism didn't work. It was and so I analyzed also Steemit, and I will keep it, even though it's not so up to date anymore. But it's a very good use case for how to not do it, how you can, and really
Those are
they,
important
but
too.
they didn't know. Yeah, it's very important. I mean, they did so many things right. I mean, they started in 2014. They were so early that they created their own stable token and their own blockchain network. So they
Yeah.
needed this convoluted token system. But I think one thing they really got wrong was to think that um, that you know, they built a plutocratic system. Those who had more money in the system, more tokens in the system, would have more power in the system, and
Right.
would get more tokens. Also, like kind of basically perpetuating the type of capitalism that we have today. So that's
Right.
unfortunately, if you perpetuate the same financial market dynamics in the Web3 than like in the real world, you won't have a different type of society. And I think this is what we're seeing as we're progressing, like as we're seeing more and more use cases emerge. What works and what doesn't work, and where does the decentralization narrative really hold? You know?
Yeah, and I mean that was the one, or I remember Justin Sun buying Steam It, the
Yeah.
and I
Oh
think
yeah,
along
that
with
was
it a
yeah.
bunch of Steam tokens, and basically wanted to have a massive influence over that ecosystem. And yeah, like the Tron Foundation actually bought Steam It,
Yeah.
and yeah, just that whole shit show, since you already dropped an F-bomb earlier, that whole shit show that started after that with the Steam community obviously not wanting the Tron Foundation to have so much influence there. And yeah, it was the soft fork and everything else that happened after that. Like that
Yeah,
was,
and that's really very interesting. That was a really very interesting what happened, because in the end, what Justin Sun did when he came in, because of the unhealthy power structures, a lot of
mhm.
people moved out. Uh,
Yeah,
because the early adopters who were there, they trusted the original founder that they wouldn't touch their tokens and use it for bad, but they didn't trust Justin Sun, right? So we can see that. And because there was this, and it totally makes sense that he came in and he bought it, but I think he underestimated, what the Web3 is about, and you can't
yeah,
apply the principles of the Web2 to the Web3. So, and it's a very good use case for how forks happen, when forks happen, and how to not design your token system, to create a fungible a fungible token, or at least a token. If I have a reputation token, they should have designed a reputation token, but they designed kind of a money token that was fully fungible, fully transferable.
hmm,
And of course, trading bots will start voting bots will start taking over,
right,
and they would have probably needed to tie their token, like the Steam Power, the reputation token that should reward people for contributions to the network. If you can sell your reputation, this is what happens. But
yeah.
in the real world, you can't sell reputation. And you shouldn't be able to sell reputation in the digital world either. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense as a governance tool.
I've actually had that exact debate with somebody at Graph Day back in June. Somebody who wanted to make this new reputation system, and I was like, "Why? Like, there's so many out there already. Like what's going to be different about yours?" And basically, it came down to he wanted the ability to sell reputation. I said that's an awful idea. Like, I'm not participating in any ecosystem where I can build up a reputation and then sell it off, because you end up in a similar position where in Web 2 right now, where you have pardon me, really well reputed, high ranking Reddit accounts that are sold off then to companies who sell comments and upvotes and all these other things, because these are valuable accounts. I'm surprised nobody's actually asked. Well, probably nobody's asked me for mine because it has my real name on it. But um, like I think that's an awful idea, and like there are a few things that we don't need markets around. And I think reputation of somebody, especially if it's
Yeah,
attached to your real name, in my case, is one of them. And so, yeah, I
yeah,
was like, I mean, like, if you're going to build a new novel reputation system that's actually going to improve on what's already come, that's great. Love to see it, and maybe advise or whatever. But yeah, his whole idea of like being able to sell that, then I was like, no, please don't like this, or at least just rethink that whole part of it. But yeah, it's
yeah.
ultimately I got
So
into the space full time working for an organization that was trying to build a decentralized identity solution. Reputation obviously was going to be part of that, or was going to be something you could add as like a verifiable credential or something like that. And so we put a lot of thought into what does this mean for the wider ecosystem. And so, I'm biased, but I just thought it was a bad idea in general.
yeah, so I think, understanding, we're this is the reason you asked me, why did I write the book, right? What was my motivation? My motivation was to understand. I think you can use a technology in a meaningful way if you understand how it works, what the potential is, what the threats are, what the do's and the don'ts are, right?
Yeah.
In order to be able to make informed decisions about what I want to create, where I want to invest, how I want to create things, I need to understand how these work. So the aim for me for writing this book was to explain the technological fundamentals, but then focus really on the social and economic aspects, and focus on the different types of tokens. What different types of tokens do we have? Money tokens, asset tokens, basically, money with properties, and stable tokens and privacy tokens, which are all the basis for DeFi products. And now you can, once you start creating a digital twin for real world assets, you can even collateralize your car, in DeFi in the future, maybe a kilowatt
Right.
hour, a fraction of your car, of a painting, etc. So, but that's the world of DeFi around money and asset tokens, and all sorts of NFTs, right? But then there is this whole world around these, what I call purpose-driven tokens, tokens that have an incentive drive behind them, and tokens that are designed to incentivize someone in the network to do something, right? And these purpose-driven tokens usually steer some kind of decentralized organization. They're mostly not very autonomous. They're mostly, but they're decentralized. They're definitely distributed over the web. So, and how do you make things who are distributed over the web do things, right? By
Right.
incentivizing them, and by creating some kind of mechanism around this incentive, where you anticipate how what the goal is, what quality criteria would be, and how this system could be gamed, and you anticipate all these things, and then you build your mechanism around this, and understanding. But the devil is always in the details, and
Hmm.
understanding these do's and don'ts of where do I need a money token, where do I need a reputation token. It really helps. And this is why in the last part of my book, I selected a few use cases, and I will have many more use cases in the third edition. And I tried to give kind of an intellectual thinking around, based on different use cases, try to understand the do's and don'ts of the token economy. Because very often people look for simplified answers. They want, like, how do I create a good incentive design? Well, it depends on what
Yeah.
you're trying to do. It depends on the culture you're trying to cultivate with what you're trying to do, right? There is no one mechanism design that fits all purposes. And even for the same type of purpose, in a different geographical location or under specific different circumstances, you might need a different design, maybe based on the social media network is not a social media network, right? Um, uh, Depending on the type of social media network and the specific purpose of the social media network, one might need a very different or a slightly different mechanism design than the other one. And the problem is that we haven't figured these things out yet. And but I think the next few years will be super interesting, because as we're going through this first few years of trial and error, it will be much easier to find the patterns of what to do and what not to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Shermin, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here on the private podcast. If people want to learn more about what you're doing, keep up to date on the farm, if you already have some places to go for that, where should they go?
Okay, so for follow me on social media, Twitter, Medium, or LinkedIn. This is where I regularly publish. When I publish something, or when I write a blog post, or there is a new publication out there, or when I have something to say, social media is where to follow me. Other than that, I have my go to token.kitchen. There you will see as we will start to share more content about what we're starting to do in October. You can follow the activities there as well in a more
Okay,
static
terrific.
way. Yeah.
Good stuff. Uh, For everybody listening or watching, thank you very much for your time as well. And until next time, stay free.